So I'm a father of one. I gotta find a babysitter. I found care.com and I was blown away. Through the platform, I was able to find local and experienced candidates along with their reviews and rates, which were way more affordable than I anticipated. Care.com really put me at ease knowing that they were all required to go through a background check. If you're like me and you need to find someone reliable for your childcare necessities, check out care.com. Find the ideal sitters for your childcare needs.
Welcome to the Powercat Podcast, GoPowercat.com's Kansas State Athletics Show. Make sure you're subscribing to our show at Apple, Spotify, Amazon, or wherever you get your podcasts. Now, from the GPC studios, GoPowercat's Cole Carmody.
Welcome into the Powercat Sources Podcast. I'm your host today, Cole Carmody, and joining me will be former Kansas State Wildcat, former Chiefs reporter, and current Director of Athlete Content at Let It Fly Media in Kansas City, BJ Kissel. And now we bring in Mr. BJ Kissel. BJ, how's it going today?
It's pretty good. I appreciate you having me on. I'm excited to talk a little K-State baseball.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. You know, like we were talking about before, anytime we can get alumni to come in and talk about their experiences at K-State, I think it's extremely valuable. And I'm so grateful that you're able to do this today. So I guess kind of what are you up to these days?
Well, I just started a new job in September with a company called Let It Fly Media. We're a creative content production house. My role is Director of Athlete Content. So as, you know, college athletes and players and, you know, this whole name, image, likeness stuff, as that all kind of comes more to the forefront, athletes are going to take kind of individual personal branding on their social media channels and their stories and their content. A lot of that's going to be brought in-house to them personally, where they can kind of tell their own stories to their own channels. And we're kind of building our niche within that space. And so I'm excited. I had spent the previous 6 years working for the Kansas City Chiefs as their team reporter, working with the players there. And now I get an opportunity to work more directly with the players and the storytelling stuff that I really enjoy doing, and kind of humanizing those guys beyond just what they do when they, you know, step out on the field.
Cool deal. I know that that's something that you mentioned, that NCAA likeness situation. I would fully imagine that here in the next few years when that law is passed, you guys are going to pick up a whole nother brand of not only consumers, but athletes themselves.
Yeah, there's a whole mess of NIL that has to be figured out first. And we're right in the middle of it. We have legal counsel who's right on the front lines of knowing what's going on from a political standpoint. Didn't realize it was as political as it is to get some of this stuff passed. And I know, you know, the state of Florida looks like it's going to be the first one to really get this thing going, but nobody really knows what this is going to look like yet. I know there's some companies out there that are setting the stage and the groundwork for athletes to be able to make money off their likeness, like Open Doors, Influencer, some of those bigger companies that are kind of the tech companies behind the distribution of getting the content to the athletes, where we're more focused on creating the actual brand for the player and creating the content and telling their story. But there's a lot of stuff that's going to have to get figured out because the majority of those deals, as it relates to NIL, at least early on, are going to be smaller deals. You know, they're going to be going to the local, you know, hospital in Manhattan up there by the football stadium and going and doing some of these smaller visits. It's not a lot of money. I don't think that's going to be thrown around for some of these starting players because I think everybody kind of understands that, you know, companies that are willing to pay money, it's going to be, you know, for some of the bigger name players, they want to see that value, not unlike you see in the NFL where a lot of the endorsements go to the more marquee players. But even from a contract standpoint, there's a lot that has to get figured out that a lot of people aren't thinking about yet as it relates to these players signing these contracts. What's in them? Do these players have representation to read through these contracts to make sure it's in their best interest to sign them? Do they need lawyers for that? And how much is a lawyer going to cost for a smaller deal? So it's a whole different deal that I've spent a lot of time working through to figure out how we can position ourselves to help athletes, because that's what all of Let It Fly Media are former sports journalists and athletes at different stages. And, you know, I was a college athlete, obviously playing baseball at K-State. My wife was a college athlete at K-State playing volleyball there. And we've been around sports our entire lives. So we want to help athletes. And as NIL grows, we got to figure out how we can help with what we do, but also make sure that, everything's buttoned up for the athlete and they're not these unintended consequences that people aren't paying attention to now as, this whole world really changes and gets flipped on its head for the first time. There's a lot of growing pains we're all going to have to go through.
I think that's awesome. I mean, there's so much opportunity out there for athletes now, and within the coming years, hopefully you guys, I think that's awesome what you're doing. You mentioned your time at K-State with baseball. We'll get into that. You also mentioned your time with the Chiefs, and I can't not have you on a podcast and ask you, how cool was it to see the Chiefs finally win the Super Bowl?
For somebody who grew up sitting in section 338, row 10, seats 11 and 12 with my dad, from the time I could walk until I went to college, it was special. It was special to get that job, to be a part of it. I thought about that every time I walked into either the practice facility or just, on game day. You walk over to Arrowhead and you walk out that tunnel, and I would get jitters even 6 years into the job. It was an amazing job. It was an amazing experience. I would recommend that job to anybody who wants to get into this business. I'd recommend going and working for teams. I've said that to a lot of students and a lot of people from K-State that have reached out to me, that while this whole industry is always going to be changing, whether it's platforms like your guys' self at GoPowercat and all of the parent companies with Fox Media and Bleacher Report and all of these different companies and local newspapers, trying to figure out how to stay afloat and to monetize their content right now. It's why the world is changing. Places like The Athletic start popping up with these paid subscriptions. So I've always advised people to not, kind of stick their thumb up at a team site, because teams are always going to need their own in-house content people. And those people are not, being paid off ad revenue from banner ads or whatever else are placed on websites or pre-roll ads for videos or whatever that stuff that digital media companies have to sell and use to make money. And so that's kind of how I'm thinking about that space. And yeah.
Well, the K-State family is huge, and the K-State family is awesome. I think you can agree with me on that. And one person who was a part of that K-State family also won a Super Bowl with the Chiefs, and that's Byron Pringle. How cool is that also? I mean, I know we're on the Chiefs here, but how cool is that just to see somebody like Byron Pringle, who has shared the same experiences as you and so many others, be able to have success and find success at the highest level?
It's awesome. As somebody who grew up, obviously, I actually grew up a KU fan. I don't think a lot of K-Staters know that. My wife knows that, unfortunately.
Well, now you're going to get exposed. So
my wife's from Manhattan, and she went to K-State. So her whole family knows this, because they're all K-Staters. My whole family were KU people and that was my allegiance until I went to college. And then actually ended up going to Central Missouri right out of high school. I was part of Brad Hill's 2003 national championship team that led him to getting the job at K-State. And then I transferred with him and played my last 3 years in Manhattan. But we love K-State. We love everything about K-State. It was cool for me to be around Byron, because he knew I was a K-Stater. I was not shy about it. Herbie Teope, the lead beat writer for the Kansas City Star, is also a K-Stater. Blair Kirchhoff is a K-Stater. So there's a lot of K-Staters on the Chiefs beat, people who are around in media. But yeah, it was special to be around Byron. I know when we played the Broncos, I was standing on the sideline talking to Byron and Dalton Reisner, another K-Stater. And every time I went to the Senior Bowl and went to different places, I was always looking for the K-Staters, whether it was Cody Whitehair. Back in the day, it was Arthur Brown and Chris Harper. I've always sought out the K-State guys wherever I've been, and it's Tyler Lockett. It's always been a running joke wherever we go for Chiefs content that if there's a K-Stater around, like the Chiefs channels are going to have content about whatever K-Staters in the area. But Byron was great. It was cool to be there, to watch him win a Super Bowl and witness it. And Byron's got a crazy, cool, inspiring story of his own with things that he's gone through and maturing that he's done throughout his life. And he's talked a little bit about it, and it's great to see. But as somebody finished off from earlier, somebody grew up a K-State fan, and to see Byron win a Super Bowl, and somebody just grew up a Chiefs fan, to be standing on the sidelines down in Miami when they won the Super Bowl. I was doing stuff I was a sideline reporter for the radio network that year, and to be down there watching them win, and to be within like 5 feet of Sammy Watkins catching that long pass towards the end of the game to get them the go-ahead touchdown. Memories I'll never forget, and things that I'll take with me and share with my kids. And I've got pictures of me standing on the sideline and acting like an idiot, jumping up and down and cheering while I'm supposed to be working. But luckily I've got those pictures so I can show my kids one day that Dad was cool. And he did have a good view of that game.
It's so cool. Byron Pringle, I think, is really he is the typical K-State story. I mean, when you think about from the junior college ranks all the way to undrafted free agent and then having success and, to potentially being a number 2 or number 3 receiver this fall. I mean, it is so cool what he has been able to do. And I know K-State fans are extremely proud of him just because of, he's one of our own. And that's the thing that I think makes the K-State fan base so amazing is that once you are a part of the K-State family, you are a part of the K-State family for life. And another person
Absolutely.
that was a part of the K-State family, you mentioned it, is Brad Hill. And so I want to get into that because obviously you played baseball at K-State. You mentioned you started at Central Missouri State, which is now the University of Central Missouri, which I'm not even that old, and I still think of it as CMSU.
I always say CMSU. Yeah. It's hard for me to say UCM. It sounds weird to me.
So Coach Hill, amazing. I think the things that he did for this program were just truly awesome. And now, Pete Hughes is in here and trying to replicate some of the success he had. Just how fun was it to play for Coach Hill and to come over with him? Like you mentioned, when you came from CMSU, coming to K-State, how was that transition and how was it actually just playing for Coach Hill?
It was amazing. I owe a lot to Coach Hill, both personally, professionally. I did a lot of growing up under Coach Hill, both at Central Missouri and when I got to K-State, and for different reasons. And then Coach Hill saw me go through a lot. I went through a lot in my life when I was at K-State. I lost my dad my junior year to cancer when I was playing baseball there. And so, Coach Hill's seen me through a lot. And it wasn't just Coach Hill. It was Scott Thomason, who was the operations director at the time, who's from Manhattan, who's back at Central Missouri now, is an athletic director in charge of all the facilities down there in Warrensburg. And so there were a lot of people, not just Coach Hill, that were involved. But it was an amazing experience to play for Coach Hill. I knew growing up in the Kansas City area that everybody wants to go D1, and you've got these big dreams of, playing in front of 10,000 people. But when you talk to baseball people around, especially when I was in high school, they said, who's the best coach? What's the best program? Central Missouri was the top of the list every single time because of just how dominant they were at the Division II level. And they're still very, very good. Mm-hmm. But the 2 years I redshirted my first year at Central Missouri, I had gotten injured. I was redshirting anyway, but I had gotten injured. I had a collapsed lung my freshman year, right before Christmas. About 4 months after I got there. Like I said, I didn't have a good fall when I first went there. I was redshirting after I signed, and then I got hurt. And so there was a lot of doubt, let alone, a year later, Coach Hill bringing me with him to K-State. Or there's a funny story behind that now, but that I can share in a minute. But yeah, it was kind of a no-brainer from a baseball perspective at that time to go work with Coach Hill. The year before I got there, I think they finished third in the country. Or fourth. And I think we finished third my freshman year that I redshirted, went 53-10 that year. And then the next year we were 54-8. So you're talking about winning 117, 110 games and losing less than 20. Mm-hmm. And so we were so dominant at Central Missouri at all levels. And not just because of the top talent that we had, but just the depth, everything. It was fun to step out on the field knowing that how good you were. And to Coach Hill's credit, and the one thing that it was a little different when he got to K-State because he had strength coaches and he had, all these more resources that we didn't have at Central Missouri. But, he ran us a lot at Central Missouri. And looking back on it, and I've kind of taken some of these things when I've coached, high school. I don't think the high school guys probably appreciated it much, but, we were so talented at Central Missouri that we knew that whenever we stepped on the field, we were going to be more talented than the team that we played against. And that can make you lazy. That can make you kind of entitled and not feel like you have to work for it because you just let the talent take over. And so that was part of why he ran us to death. Literally my lung collapsed my freshman year from conditioning, running a long course. They called it the long course. It was about 3.5 miles. And we had to run it 5 times within a 3-day period within 30 degrees. It was just one of those get tough kind of moments. And I think, there was no suing back then. It was just kind of hey, stuff happened. I got hurt. Stuff, you move on with it, you deal with it, you move on with it. And so he made you work for it. And as a kid coming out of, Blue Valley High School, and I thought I was pretty good, to go to high school and to get humbled a little bit, the fall of my freshman year, and then to get hurt and to have a lot of doubts of whether I was going to even be part of the program, going into that my second year, my redshirt freshman year. There was no guarantees that I was going to stick it out there or be a part of it. And so that, 6 to 8 months after I got hurt, after my lung collapsed, and I lost about 25 pounds, was in the hospital for almost 2 weeks with some complications while I was in there. That the biggest change in my life for me mentally to just get past something was after I got out of the hospital, getting ready for that next fall to show them that not only could I make the team, but I could be an asset to them. And that whole period, Coach Hill challenged me. And luckily for me, I answered that call. I came back the next fall after having the ERA of like 9.5, I think, my freshman year. That first fall, I didn't give up an earned run the entire fall. And I was voted the top relief pitcher as a freshman coming off of a collapsed lung. I was in the best shape of my life. During all the conditioning, I was intentionally running faster than everyone else and just staring at Coach the entire time when we were running hundreds on the track, because I wanted him to know that I wasn't this fragile, broken thing with this collapsed lung, that I could be counted on and that I was healthy. And so I was going out of my way to show him that I was in good shape and that I could handle all of this. And that led to a fall where I pitched really well. And it just kind of clicked for me. I was the first guy out of the bullpen in 2003 for the national championship team. Picked up the win, kind of vultured it in a little bit. I didn't give up a run, but I came in a tie game, got one out in the semifinal game to go to the national championship, and ended up winning it in the bottom of that inning. So I technically got the win in the semifinal game to go to the national championship. And then when he got the job at K-State, there was an opportunity for me to challenge myself and to see if I could play at a higher level. Because we had already won a national title. We had achieved everything we possibly could, and I was ready for the next challenge.
That's something you don't see a lot, is the jump from Division II to Division I. I think about with K-State football is a little bit different, but Chris Kleiman coming from FCS to FBS, it really, and I think I want to say that just doesn't happen that much. I mean, so for the fact that he was able to, obviously you guys had an amazing program, and Central Missouri still has an amazing program, like you mentioned, relatively have fairly quick success. I mean, I was looking at the conference standings. The Big 12, we'll get into that in the second half here. But
I've got stories.
The Big 12 has been one of the best conferences in baseball for years now. But for him to be able to come in and win some games, I mean, the program where, let's face it, I mean, K-State baseball has not exactly always been the best program, in the Big 12.
Yeah.
And so for him to be able to come in and have some type of success, and then, eventually years down the line, make it to one game away from the College World Series, obviously the pinnacle of college baseball, I think is very cool. We'll get back with BJ Kissel coming up here in the second half of the podcast. Stay tuned. You're listening to the Powercat Sources Podcast.
GoPowercat.com's Powercat podcast continues after this short break.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds. Recently, I asked Mint Mobile's legal team if big wireless companies are allowed to raise prices due to inflation. They said yes. And then when I asked if raising prices technically violates those onerous 2-year contracts, they said, "What the f*** are you talking about, you insane Hollywood ass?" So to recap, we're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply.
Welcome back to the Powercat podcast. Now, let's return to the GPC studios.
Welcome back in here to the Powercat Sources Podcast. We're talking with BJ Kissel of Let It Fly Media. So you get to K-State and you come in, and what is your initial thoughts? Because you said you were, earlier in the podcast, you said, I was a KU fan all the way. So what were your initial thoughts? You step foot on campus, ready to start at a new school, ready to start in a new program with, your same head coach, but still everything else is new. What were your initial thoughts when you first stepped foot in Manhattan?
Man, that's such a loaded question. I had a lot of people I went to high school with that went to K-State. So from a personal standpoint, like, I knew people who were there. So it wasn't completely foreign in that way. But it was me and one other guy, Steve Murphy. We were roommates all through college at K-State. We were the two guys the two players that had come up with Coach Hill from Central Missouri, along with Tommy Myers, who was an assistant coach, and then Scott Thomason, the operations director, had come. And then went back to Central Missouri afterwards, as did Coach Myers. Went back and was the head coach at Central for a while. So it was weird at first because you want to create these new relationships with your new teammates that had been, playing for Coach Clark. And we knew Coach Clark. I knew Coach Clark. I still know him. We went to the same church up in Manhattan with him and his wife up at St. Thomas More. And so I have all the respect in the world for Coach Clark. But it was kind of weird being like Coach's guys. Like that's kind of how we felt, me and Steve, when we got there. That we were the guys who followed Coach. So we were Coach's guys. And so we hosted a lot of the recruits when they came in that fall and everything. But it was kind of a wake-up call for Steve and I, because we wanted that challenge of playing D1 baseball. I knew I wasn't going to get drafted. I wasn't that good. But, with 3 years of eligibility left and wanting to know how I have an opportunity to compete at the highest level of baseball in college baseball. Big 12 at that time sent three of the 8 teams in the College World Series came from the Big 12 our first year at K-State. And so the first eye-opening thing for me was just that Steve and I were Coach's guys, and we kind of had to feel our way through that with some of our new teammates, because the one thing that Coach really wanted to do that first fall was figure out who wanted to be there and who didn't. A lot of the leftover upperclassmen had either transferred away or just quit baseball altogether at K-State before Coach got there. And so when we first got there that fall, it was before some of the new NCAA rules regarding how many guys you could sign for the fall and then cut, and then they have to go play JUCO ball somewhere, and then they come back, and it basically becomes like a huge tryout during the fall. Is how some of the Texas schools were using. Like University of Texas signs 40 pitchers in the fall, and then the 20 who don't make it go to San Jacinto Junior College and then try to come back the next fall and do the same thing. So something like that was going on. I don't know all the rules, but they created these rules where you can't do that anymore. But we didn't have that rule my first year. So there were a ton of players. We were doubled up in lockers. And honestly, like, it was every other day. Like, there was a pink slip in somebody's locker when they had a bad day that fall that they were no longer on the team. And we were running every day, like 6 o'clock in the morning. We were up at the football indoor running because he wanted to see who would quit. He wanted to see who wanted to be there to help change the program and change the culture of what everything was. So for Steve and I, a lot of Central Missouri was dominating. It was winning. It was proving you're the best every time you step on the field. And as soon as we got to K-State, it was, hey, we got to build a program up that hasn't had a winning season, like is struggling in the Big 12. Like, we've got to turn this around. And in that conference, it's really difficult to do. And Cole, I'll tell you this story because I'm not going to name any names because I'm friends with these guys. But I'll never forget one of the first days that Murphy and I were in Manhattan before the fall. I think it was like August, September, something like that. Because I think there was an NFL preseason game on. And we got a text message from one of the seniors who lived with a couple other guys on the baseball team who invited us over to hang out on a Sunday afternoon, and it was to watch football. So I can't remember all the timing of everything, but there was a football game on. We were all hanging out. It was early, and we had conditioning Monday morning at like 6 a.m. or 5:30. We had to be there. And Murphy and I, coming from Central, knowing how much we ran, we're drinking bottles of water. We had bananas that we took with us. We're like, we know this is not going to be fun, guys. And we got there, and they had a keg. Oh, man. Like, they were handing out cups. And like Murphy and I just looked at each other, and we're trying, like, we're not those guys. Like, we're freshmen too. So we're younger than these guys. We're new to this program with the coach. And we just kind of walked in and we're like, hey, no, thanks. We got conditioning tomorrow. And one of the guys who lived there ended up not playing for K-State, but was on the team at the time, just said, like, we've run before, we've got this. And I remember looking at mumbling to Murphy. I was like, either we're really out of shape and like we just complained a lot and this is normal, or these guys have no idea what tomorrow is going to be. And lo and behold, the next day, like, guys are throwing up during warm-ups and like all this stuff. And Murphy and I just kind of looked at each other like, hey, we knew what this was going to be. And not that we were these great athletes or in great shape or anything, but we weren't drinking the day before, that's for sure. So that's kind of where it started for us, as just far as like a buy-in of what this is, what it's going to look like. And there's some stories there at the beginning, those first couple of years, but I've never had so much pride and guys that I played with before the program really turned around and started having the success that you mentioned, being one win away from going to Omaha. I mean, those guys that were a part of that, AJ Morris, Rob Vaughn, those guys were freshmen when I was a senior. And like those guys were the young class that Coach Hill, when he got to bring his recruits in, that year they won the Big 12. Like a lot of those guys are the guys that, we helped as seniors. And that I take a lot of pride in guys like Daniel Edwards and some of those guys that had success. Just, we had good relationships and we kind of taught him and taught those guys what Coach Hill was expecting. And we didn't have the talent. I didn't have the talent of the guys that he was bringing in, but I knew what Coach Hill expected. And that was one of the reasons he saw value in me being there. It was just kind of being that voice for him, not necessarily coach's pet or any of that kind of stuff, but just kind of knowing what to do, knowing the signs, knowing the rules, knowing that I'm going to be a good teammate to everybody around me, and that I wasn't trying to be the Friday night starter, that I liked being a fire relief guy. And I was comfortable with that role. And so I had a lot of pride seeing the success that they had after we left. But those first couple of years were pretty rough. Just for how much we struggled. That first year at K-State, we started off 21-6 that first year. We got ranked. We were 23rd in the country going into that first series, the first Big 12 series against Mizzou. And at that time, Max Scherzer was a long reliever at Mizzou his sophomore year. He wasn't even starting yet at Missouri. And so we go there and we take 2 or 3 from Mizzou. I think I got a save in one of those games pitched, and we're riding high. We think we're good. We're like, Murphy and I were looking at each other like, holy cow. Like I thought the team at Central Missouri would have beat the K-State team he was at, but here we are ranked in the top 25 D1 first year. And then Cole, I think we lost like 15 straight games in the Big 12 or something. Like it went from 2 or 3 Missouri, like we're ranked, to, I think we won like 1 game, 2 games, maybe the next month once the Big 12 started. And that was Alex Gordon's Nebraska teams. I mean, there was some talent, and then our eyes got open and we're like, okay, this is more what we expected.
So what would you say, I mean, you kind of touched on your eye-opening experience, but I mean, is there one in particular event for you personally where you were like, oh my goodness, like these guys are really good?
Yeah, some of the first Big 12 games, I mean, the difference between the kind of mid-level, and I always separated, some people ask me, I always separated, I went to K-State, like, are you guys any good? It was like, compared to what? Compared to like just all across D1, we were okay. But for a Big 12 team, like, no. Like, we were not a team that could compete consistently in the Big 12. We didn't have the pitching. We didn't have the hitting. We didn't have the depth. And I was a part of that. And so, like, I played baseball at K-State. I'm very proud of that. If I was at my absolute best, making my best pitches, I could compete against some of the best players. But there were times that we would play Oklahoma State and some of these schools where I would throw like a perfect pitch for me, which was a changeup. I would intentionally go like 2-0, like trying to go 3 or 4 inches off the plate with fastballs, trying to get a call to go 2-0 to then throw a changeup. Like that was if they had analytics back, like when I played, like I would not have played college baseball if some of these advanced stats were there, because people would realize 2-0, 2-1, like 95% of the time I'm throwing a changeup. So that's kind of how I made a living. But yeah, when I would make my best pitches and those balls would get hit off the wall, I'd throw a 2-1 changeup like off the plate away from a lefty. And I was actually better I was a right-handed pitcher, but I was better against lefties. I think lefties hit like 120 off me and righties hit like 460, which is unheard of for a right-handed pitcher. And a side story on that, Augie Garrido, former Texas coach, legend, once pinch hit a right-hander against me when I came in. And I remember thinking later that night after I got off the field, or after I went home, that Augie Garrido knew enough about me.
There you go.
By like what I do, like a D1 legendary coach knew enough about me to do that. Like those were the dumb things that I was like, this is cool. I got a national championship ring from Division II, and one of the best coaches in NCAA baseball history knew enough about me to pinch hit a righty against me. These are dumb things that I was taking solace in, but yeah, I lost my train of thought there, Cole. I apologize.
Well, I think anytime you're talking about Augie Garrido, I mean, one of literally the best coaches in the NCAA in any sport, in the history of any sport. Yeah. I mean, that is pretty cool.
And Cole, I will tell you this real quick, because Coach Hill has mentioned this before, that he said that one of the turning point wins in turning the program around early on was when we went down to Texas, and that was the second year. So that would have been 2005, I believe it was. Yep. We went down to the University of Texas on the road. They were the number one team in the country. We lost I want to say it was a Saturday. This is so long ago, I forget these. It was either this Friday or the Saturday game that we lost on a bad call at home plate. It was Corey Koski was the umpire. I'll never forget, because we had Corey Koski at Central Missouri. We knew Koski. He was the home plate umpire, and I was pitching. It was a tie game in the ninth. I came in, infield's in, bottom of the ninth, get a ground ball to the second baseman. He throws home. It pulls the catcher off the plate a little bit. Catcher was David Baker. And the umpire said that his foot wasn't on the plate. And so they called him safe at home, and that's how the game ended. And there was one out, I think, so it wouldn't have been end of the inning, but it was still a double play ball right to a one-hopper screamer, especially a Texas with that turf. Right. Like the ball was hit quickly. Throw wasn't even rushed, but he called him safe. And then the next morning in the paper, I don't remember what the headline was, but there was a picture that showed our catcher with his foot on the plate with the ball in his glove. And we were so angry. Everybody was screaming. So we came back the next day and then won. And so this again was, we were struggling. We were still not good that second year. I know we finished with a winning record, but inside the Big 12, we were not good. But that win on the road against the number one team in the country kind of showed everybody, especially the young freshmen who ended up being part of that, super regional team, that, we can compete at this level if we do the right things and we have enough talent. If we're at our best, we can compete. They just needed to get some more talent, get guys like me out of there, and get some of those other guys in there that could compete against the best at that level. And they ended up getting those guys. But Coach Hill's mentioned that win at Texas that we did get on Sunday as being one of the biggest wins of the program. And I'm proud that I pitched in that game too. I came in the ninth inning and got one of the outs. And we won. I think it was a 1-run game that we won. And I've always said that was my World Series. And that was my kind of defining moment of going D1 and making that decision to leave my friends and leave my teammates at Central Missouri. Was I got an opportunity to pitch in a win at the number one place in the country at that time. So that was the turning point for me as the game that changed everything. But there were a lot of pitches that I threw, Cole, that I was like, oh, that's sick. Out of my hand. I'm like, he ain't hitting that. And then they hit it off the wall. And I just look over I don't know what to do. That's the best pitch I can throw. These guys are good.
I will tell you that the talent in the Big 12 now is still amazing. And K-State is catching up to there, and they're catching up very quickly. And that's one thing, even at the end of Coach Hill's time here, the guys that are having success for K-State right now were brought in by Coach Hill, and one of those guys is Jordan Wicks. And Jordan Wicks will be most likely the first round draft pick in any sport for K-State since 2009. I believe it was what I saw a stat from the other day. Right now he's projected to go, I think, number 17. But I think there's a very good chance he could, continue to move up the ladder with the success he has. As someone who has been around some extremely high-level athletes and also pitched, what if you were to be able to talk to Jordan, what do you think you would give him as one piece of advice as he starts to move into his professional career?
As someone who's never met him and never asked for this advice, the one thing that I've learned from being around guys like Patrick Mahomes and Alex Smith, I know his name's in the headlines because of his retirement and everything that he's been through, but Tyrann Mathieu, Chris Jones, all of these guys, they love the process of working. They love the small details of being better at their position. And so a lot of fans and a lot of people that haven't played, these sports at a high level, and they don't see those guys and the work that they put in every day, the little things. that they're obsessed with the details and the little things, and they work on them every day. They're working on Christmas. They're doing all those things. So just because these guys are the best in the world at what they do doesn't mean they're not working harder than everybody else who's trying to catch them. And so I don't think I would have to tell Jordan that. He's put himself in this position to be one of the best players in the country. Continue doing that, but know that there's no step of the way in which there becomes less work. There's always going to be more work, and it's never going to slow down. So I used to ask, John Dorsey, and then it was Brett Veach and Coach Reed, always around the combine, of how do you tell the difference between a guy who loves football and loves what football can do for him? Because those are two entirely different things. Coach Reed would be coaching high school football for free if he wasn't coaching the Chiefs. Like if the NFL wasn't a thing, Coach Reed would still be coaching football somewhere. He's a football guy. And so I don't know as much about, which is weird because I played baseball, the scouting as it relates to baseball and that whole process of getting drafted and all that. But I can tell you, I would be very surprised if it wasn't as similar in that the guys who get drafted, the ones who are successful and the ones who aren't, it's who can handle, being on their own. In a lot of ways, especially with baseball in the minor leagues and all my friends who went and did it, there's a lot that's on you individually to get better as an individual player. Now, when you're a first round pick, you're probably gonna have more resources than a lot of other people that get drafted in the 30th round. But that being said, if you love the process and you love the work, then the results will follow. And if you just fall in love with the results, you're going to burn out. And so I've seen it with football players. Some of the most talented, players in the draft every year don't pan out because they didn't necessarily love the sport. They loved what the sport was able to do for them or their family or financially setting them up. And so with baseball in particular, because it does take longer to go through the minors and go through that, you got to love the grind. You got to love the game more than what it can do for you.
I think you said that perfectly. And as someone who has had a chance to cover him this year and cover K-State sports in general, he is extremely talented. And I think K-State fans, when you have something right in front of you that you're going to be able to see, like Byron Pringle we were talking about, for example. I think K-State fans had a pretty good idea he was going to be able to play in the NFL. You got a guy in Jordan Wicks who has a very good opportunity to pitch in the major leagues, which is something that doesn't happen every day. And so I've always encouraged K-State fans, when you see something that has an opportunity to be great, make sure you take advantage of it. And I know Jordan will definitely do that. And last thing before we let you out of here, BJ, is now that you are not necessarily official covering the Chiefs, can you be more of a fan?
The good thing for me is I was always a fan, and I think that was the best part about working for the team. And there's certain things you can and can't say. Not that it was ever specifically said, but I'm not gonna be critical of a bunch of players that go in the locker room and try to talk to them, because they are human beings.
Yeah.
Especially when you work for the team and you see them every day. But luckily for me, the way that I just kind of am, and with my personality, and I'm kind of a bleeding heart, empathetic person, is that you see, when you get inside, and Cole, you probably see this with the work that you see, the access, and you see the work that these guys put into it, it gives you a different perspective. And just because they don't go out on game day and perform and make plays, which is their job, and they lose their job if they don't execute their plays, but to see them give everything they have to this, the amount of time they put in, what they put through their bodies, how they have to get prepared every week, getting on the team plane after a game on the road at midnight and seeing how these guys are struggling to get up the stairs because of what they put their bodies through to play this game, it gives you a different perspective. So I wasn't necessarily as critical or just saying whatever I wanted. Even now that I work for the team, it hasn't changed what I've said, because I understand better what these guys put into it. And some are better than others, and those guys can do that, and everybody can have their opinion. It's just, for me, to see the amount of work they went in, it seems disrespectful. And I know these guys on a personal level, a lot of them. So I'll always have an opinion about how I think about stuff, but it'll never come as disrespect to any player, let alone how successful or not successful they are, because you can't get to that level and you can't play for Coach Reed if you aren't bought in 100% and willing to give everything. And for me, there's a line to be drawn of how critical you can be of that. And not going too far. And luckily, good and bad for me, I've seen it. And a lot of other fans, they haven't. You don't know what you don't know. And the thing for me is I saw it, and I do know, and I know better. So I'll always be careful in that. But the one thing, Cole, I want to say before we go, that since the audience here is K-State baseball, that, with all the success from the glory years, talking about, AJ Morris and Rob Vaughn, who's up at the University of Maryland, just absolutely killing it. One of the best dudes I've ever been around in my life, Rob. So I want to see the University of Maryland have all the success in the world. But the one thing that I would say is that I don't think anyone who's a K-State baseball fan should forget Carlos Torres.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that he's been promoted. You guys have done some stuff with him on social. Yep. But what Carlos did for our entire program of K-State back in the day when I was playing that first year, that was my first year at K-State. Carlos was by far our best pitcher. Mm-hmm. And they started throwing him on Sundays because that was our best chance to win one game out of a series, was to throw our ace on Sunday as opposed to matching him up with Sam LeCure or whoever else that was playing at Tech, Kyle McCullough, all these guys, all these David Percy at the University of Oklahoma, all these top draft picks that, we had Carlos. And Carlos, I don't know what the records are for innings pitched in a season and all that, but we were not very good. And Carlos worked his tail. He's the hardest working player I've ever been around in my life. He had a great career. Spanning probably almost a decade, I think. I mean,
10
tell
years.
me if I'm wrong.
Yep, 10 years.
10 years in the league as a guy that had 2 pitches when we were in college. and he lived in University Commons. He didn't live too far from me. He still lives in Kansas City. He's still a proponent and a supporter of a place that he was at 4 different schools in college. He was at K-State for just 1 year, transferred from San Jose State to play that year. But while we glorify K-State baseball in the history, I know that 3 years that I was at K-State and the 1 year that Carlos was there, the success wasn't there, but he carried that torch for K-State baseball. And we beat Texas A&M at Texas A&M when Carlos threw, I think, a complete game that day in front of 5,000 people. When we weren't very good, there were a handful of times where we could kind of stick out our chest a little bit and feel good about where we were headed as a program that first year, before we beat Texas my junior year. We played at Minute Maid Park, beat Ohio State, and Carlos pitched that game in front of a lot of people as Texas and Rice were getting ready to play right after us.
That's why they were there. Yeah.
Yeah. I actually do have one last funny story. Sorry. The first weekend games that we had for K-State when we were there was down at Minute Maid Park. It was that Big 12 Classic.
Right.
We had played Ohio State. We played Rice. And I think we played like the University of Hawaii or some other team was there. We hadn't even practiced outside yet because of snow. And then we were on the field at an indoor field at Minute Maid playing, and we got our tails kicked. I got shellacked by Paul Yanish, hit the train off me. Paul Yanish was the shortstop at Rice. He was playing for the Reds for a number of years. He got drafted really high. He's a stud. But I'll never forget, I read Baseball America on the flight back after that tournament, and I was reading about the shortstop who hit a 400-foot home run off me, and Baseball America said he's major league ready as a defender but doesn't show much pop with his bat. And I just remember being like, well, you're welcome for hanging a slider so you could hit the train off me, Paul, but so you could show all those scouts your skills. But the other thing I remember is that before we played Rice, I was watching the guys warm up, and there was a guy in jeans and like a plaid shirt playing catch out in the outfield for Rice, playing catch with like one of the coaches. And I said it out loud, and it was one of those like foot in your mouth type moments. But I was like, this is pretty unprofessional. Like put a jersey on. Who is this guy? Come to find out it was Lance Berkman because he played for the Astros. Right. Playing at Minute Maid. And he played for Rice I think it was Wayne Graham was his name. He's a long time, like 50-year coach at Rice. He's a legend that played. Lance Berkman was coach. He was playing there. Coach said, come out and play catch. So I was over there like trashing Lance Berkman, right? And like his prime for the Astros. Yeah. And then Roger Clemens threw a bullpen before our game. And then Craig Biggio like walked out during a game in one of our in the middle of one of our games from like the internal, like the dugout that was connected through ours. But anyway, I'll never forget Carlos, and I don't think K-State fans should forget that name. If anybody remembers anything about those first few years, Carlos carried that torch, represented K-State really well throughout his entire major league career, and he was a great dude. And so that's my 2 cents for K-State baseball fans. Do not forget Carlos Torres, because he was the first guy that I played with that made it to the major leagues and played a long time. And then it was Nick Martini after that.
Yep.
It was right after I got done. He actually played for me when I ran the team in Junction City, the summer team, for a few years. So we got those 2 guys, but let's not forget Carlos.
There you go. Jordan Wicks will not be far behind and hopefully joining that class. BJ, thanks a lot for coming on today. I really enjoyed talking with you. Next time you come down to Manhattan, don't be a stranger to hit up Fitz, hit up myself, and we'll take you out and show you a good time. How about that?
Yeah, you guys, absolutely. I'll hit you up and hit up Smoller and Kenny Lanou and Lackey and all those guys. We come all the time. I mean, my wife, my in-laws still live there. We've got 2 young kids. We're back all the time. We were there for the spring game a couple weeks ago for the football practice. So definitely look you guys up. Love K-State, love Manhattan. We'll do everything I can in my current job to help promote and help K-State athletics in every way that I can. And yeah, hopefully the baseball team keeps it going and Coach Hughes keeps everything going. It seems like it's going great so far.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, BJ.
All right, thanks, Cole.
Thank you for listening to the Powercat Podcast. Make sure you're subscribing to our show at Apple, Spotify, Amazon, or wherever you get your podcast. Powercat Podcast, all rights reserved. GoPowercat.com.
With Blue Link Plus, you can access your Hyundai Tucson Limited remotely. Doors unlocked, temperature set, lost car found.
There it is.
Get complimentary class-leading Blue Link Plus. Call 562-314-4603 for complete details.